Hello everyone. In today's guide we're going to be going over which chapter of Space Marines is best suited for competitive play. Now when I say Space Marine, I mean all the chapters from the Space Marine Codex. I am not including any of the chapters that aren't in the Space Marine Codex because it wouldn't be fair since they don't have their own special rules yet. I know I could include Grey Knights since they have their codex released, but I'd rather wait to include them once every other chapter that's not in the Space Marine book gets their own codex. So with that said, let's get right into which chapter out of the Space Marine book is best suited for competitive. I will be including the Crimson Fist and Imperial Fist chapter as one entry because they have the exact same rules and playstyles. So with that said, we'll have 7 entries. So starting with the least competitive. Coming in as the worst at number 7, White Scars. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. In 7th, these guys were pretty good and had most people playing their ultramarine armies as White Scars. Now in 8th, it's the other way around. Now there are a ton of white painted ultramarines. White Scars used to be great at running and gunning, which is not something they are great at anymore. They lost a lot of loadouts because GW stopped making them and were basically abandoned. Their identity now is supposed to be close combat, but their best units are overpriced and not even included in the codex because again, GW doesn't make the models, so they left them out. Their chapter tactic allows them to charge after they leave combat, but again, their best charging units aren't that good because they are overcosted compared to everything else. As for their chapter specific stratagem, they have a cool one where they can advance a unit of bikes and still shoot and charge, which is okay and definitely usable, but I think there are other army specific stratagems that just outshine White Scars. As for their chapter specific relic, it's pretty bad. I'm not even going to mention what it does. Overall, this chapter is by far the worst chapter in the Space Marine Codex right now. The next least competitive chapter, coming in at number 6, is going to be Iron Hands. Iron Hands falls short because of their trait. A common pattern you're going to notice with these selections is that the chapter tactic and which unique units that chapter has available is what's going to affect the list the most. Chapter tactics are an extra rule for your army that you're going to have for the entire game, unlike stratagems. Sure, stratagems are nice, but more often than not, you use the reroll and interrupt attack stratagems more often than you use army-specific ones. So chapter tactics and unique units are what are going to affect this list the most. Getting back on topic, Iron Hands have a 6+ Feel No Pain for their tactic. For you new players, in 7th edition, a Feel No Pain roll was made after your initial save roll was made, kind of like how it is now, except there was no damage modifier. You roll your armor or invulnerable save. If you fail, you have a Feel No Pain roll if your unit had that rule. So for anything that works like a disgustingly resilient save, you'll hear me call it Feel No Pain. So with that said, Iron Hand's tactic gets outshined by almost everyone except White Scars, and they don't have any unique units that are on the competitive side. So they fall behind into the second last spot on this list. The third least competitive chapter, coming in at number 5, is going to be the Imperial and Crimson Fists. I'm including these armies as one because they share the same trait. I believe they have different stratagems, but they aren't that good if I remember correctly. Their tactic is that when they shoot at an enemy unit that's in cover, that unit does not get a cover save. It's actually not that bad of a tactic, it's just super situational. Situational rules are really bad in competitive because what you want the most is consistency. You want to win every game, not 2 out of 3, not 1 out of 3. You want to win every game as long as you're playing competitively. But yeah, their trait isn't that good, and they don't really have any unique units that are competitive. So because their trait is situational, they're not last place because it's still usable and it's not completely useless like the White Scars or almost the Iron Hands. The middle of the pack chapter, sitting at the 4th most competitive or 4th least competitive, depending on how you want to look at it, is Black Templars. These guys are kinda weird. They are Marines that want to be close combat, but they don't really have anything too special that does close combat well. Most of their guys are just chain swords and bolt pistols with 1 attack. They have a cool HQ choice called the Emperor's Champion. He's super strong against characters. To explain how strong he is against characters, my buddy once one-shot my Magnus the Red with him. Mind you, I rolled awful, but it was still possible. The little guy is a beast against characters if he attacks first from charging. On top of that, they have a cool chapter tactic that can be utilized for their characters. Helbrecht, the chapter master of the Templars, is actually a pretty decent pickup too. You can make a fairly competitive list with Helbrecht and the Emperor's Champion duking it out with some characters. The weird thing is, the rest of the army would be more or less shooty units, which wouldn't make use of their tactic. The only time it's useful is for their HQs. The one last redeeming quality for this chapter is their chapter specific stratagem. 1 command point to deny a spell on a 4+. This is huge because it can be done by any Black Templar unit and can deny a game-changing spell your opponent's trying to cast, like Death Hex or Null Zone. It's really strong and what pushes them above everything else, even though their tactic isn't the best because you want to play Space Marines as shooty. That it's still, this one stratagem actually boosts them up so much, and it's the reason why they sit right in the middle and are basically the gatekeepers in between what's competitive and what's not competitive, at least for Space Marine armies. Third best chapter out of the Space Marine Codex is Salamanders. This was a close one for me between this and second best, but I think the Salamanders fall behind the other army for one reason, and I'll explain why. To get into it, I think the second best army is Raven Guard, and this is my reasoning for placing the two where they are. Sure, Salamanders get to reroll 1 hit and 1 wound per unit per phase, but if they are playing like most Space Marines in a Death Star style mobile gun line, then you probably have a Chapter Master in the middle of everyone, allowing them to reroll hits anyways. So the reroll 1 hit is useless because you can't reroll a reroll and you're already rerolling because of the Chapter Master. So it comes down to, is the reroll 1 wound a phase better than -1 to hit your units at more than 12 inches away? And I don't think so. I think the -1 to hit is huge against a bunch of armies. Against Tau and Guard, it's pretty devastating. Changing them from a 40% accuracy to a 33% accuracy is a big jump. Against Orcs, they're basically never going to hit you in shooting, so because of this very likely scenario where Tau, Orcs, and Astra Militarium are really meta right now, I think the Raven Guard edge out Salamanders by a slight bit because every competitive Space Marine list is going to have a Chapter Master surrounded by everybody. Neither of these armies have unique units, so it comes down to the chapter tactic, and because everyone has access to a Chapter Master, I think Raven Guard slightly edges the Salamanders out. Sure, you could argue that you could play Salamanders without a Chapter Master so you get better use of your chapter trait, but I don't think that's the optimal way to play, and you always want to play optimally when you're playing competitive because, again, consistency is key. So you want to play with whatever's going to be the most consistent. So now we're down to the best Space Marine army out of the Codex, and surprise, surprise, it's the Games Workshop poster boys, the Ultramarines. These guys have always been either the top or next best chapter for all the Space Marines. And since Guilliman has arrived, they are now in the lead by far. Guilliman with his Space Marine specific Warlord trait is a pretty good combo. Guilliman gives you 3 command points just because he's cool like that, and you probably have at least 6 from being Battleforged with a battalion, so you're working with 9 command points with a 1 out of 3 chance to get 1 back every time you use it, meaning statistically you should have 13 command points for the price of 9. And I still haven't mentioned that he allows Ultras within 6 inches of him to reroll every failed hit and wound, making him a way better Chapter Master. And he's also a beast in close combat, so he works as a deterrent to stop your opponent from getting too close to him in your gun line. For 360 points, Guilliman is an auto-take in every Ultramarine list, and arguable to take in every Imperium list. And he alone is the reason these guys are the best chapter. On top of him, they have arguably the best chapter tactic, with Raven Guard being the next best, where they can leave combat and shoot at a -1. Their stratagem is okay, but they have access to Guilliman with the Warlord trait that seals the deal for them. So unless some of the other chapters get their own Primarchs, I think Ultramarines are going to be keeping this top spot for a long time. So that was my list for which is the best Space Marine chapter out of the Space Marine Codex. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I taught you some stuff about the chapters in case you were wondering which chapter you wanted to play if you had competitive in mind. Remember, this video is strictly talking about competitive armies. You can always play whatever army you want and have fun if you don't care about being competitive. You're supposed to have fun when playing Warhammer, so do whatever you think you're going to enjoy. Well anyways, if you guys have any comments or suggestions for future videos, please feel free to comment them down below. Also, if you have any different opinions than I do about the placement of these chapters, then please let me know in the comments so we can have a discussion, and it might help me make the future list that includes every Space Marine chapter and not just the ones in the Space Marine book. I'm not perfect, so I might have missed something while I was looking through the codex that you spotted, or a cool combo you might have discovered that I don't know about yet. So if you know anything like that or have any other opinions, comment them down below. I'd love to learn too. Well anyways, I think I'm going to call the video here. So that's where I think all the armies fit in competitive. If you have any disagreements, let me know down below. If you like the content, subscribe for more daily Warhammer 40k content, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy wargaming, everybody.